Once again, very good morning to everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which we will discuss around Payday Super. Just some housekeeping before I move on to the slides. So, just so that everyone's aware, this webinar will be recorded. A recording will be sent to you as well. And as I go through the slides, so we will also pass on the slides to you. And at this moment, everyone is currently set to mute, and that's just to prevent any background disturbances. However, if you have any questions, feel free to just use the questionnaire or the chat box. We have a couple of colleagues of mine sitting in, and they will be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. And towards the end of the session, if we do have some spare time, I'll just probably go through some of the questions. And if there are any that have not yet been answered, then I'll probably try and address them accordingly. So that's in regards to this particular housekeeping session over here. So just a reminder again, recordings will be sent together with the slides. Give a day or two. So once the webinar is over, the team will collate all the slides and the recording. So just give it a day or two, and those details will be sent across to everyone. So just to introduce myself, my name is Justin. I will be hosting this particular session today. So I'm one of the product managers in the SimpleFund 360 team, and I've been with BGL for more than 16 years now. So yeah. Okay. So in terms of today's agenda, so what I'll do is I'll go through a couple of points over here, starting off with what is Payday Super. Now, I'm sure most of you are already aware that Payday Super is now effective from 1st July 2026. So what I'm going to do here is just to basically at a high level explain what Payday Super is, and then provide maybe a little bit more information as to, I guess, the flow on how Payday Super works in terms of the contribution messages that were sent from your payroll software and how it's being received into our SimpleFund 360 software. And in light of these Payday Super changes, we will go through what are the areas and changes that we've made in the software, just to show you what has been done to cater to these Payday Super changes. So we've updated a new contribution screen. We have what we call a member verification request that we've also automated the whole process, and I'll go through them accordingly as well. And we've also allowed or added a new ability which you can now reject contribution messages. So how I'll design this webinar is I'll go through the slides first, and then I'll switch over to the SimpleFund 360 software just so that I can showcase to you where the screens are and what are the basically areas and the functions that you can utilize in the software itself. Moving on to the next slide. So essentially, what is Payday Super? So from 1st July 2026, what it essentially entails is that employers must now pay your superannuation at the same time your salary or your wages are being paid. So these could be weekly wages, fortnightly, monthly, and so on and so forth, depending on how it's being structured at your workplace. Now, I've put in a quick table over here just to help differentiate what has changed prior to 1st July 2026 and what changes have been in place with Payday Super from 1st July 2026 onwards. In terms of your super guarantee payments or in terms of your contributions, prior to 1st July 2026, it must be received by the super fund within 28 days at the end of the quarter. And the due dates are in there, listed in that table in there. From 1st July 2026 onwards, ATO has made these changes, and where contributions are now to be paid into the fund at the same time as your pay, and it has to be within 7 business days. So just a couple of key points over here, just so that everyone's aware. Those are the basically new legislation changes that ATO has implemented with Payday Super. In terms of the changes that ATO has implemented, there is new, what we call updated standard. So it's now SuperStream Contributions version 3.0. And in addition to this, there is this two new, I guess, features that ATO has implemented, which is what we call the new payments platform system. And what this essentially is some of you might probably be more familiar with Payday that you have probably used in your banks or OSCO. So this NPP platform is an infrastructure that was previously launched way back in February 2018. And it was basically launched and managed by Australian Payment Plus. And the idea behind this is to essentially send data at real time pace. Okay, so that's the idea behind this new payment platform implementation. And this is a new approved payment method. And what that means is that your bank accounts that you have set up within your funds must support NPP receipt from 1st July 2026 onwards. And the other thing that ATO has now implemented is what we call a member verification request. It is an additional compliance check. And the idea behind that is employers, before making the first ever contribution into the fund, they can request what we call a member verification request, or MVR for short, is to ensure that the fund can receive contributions. So the idea behind this is ATO is trying to prevent errors where contributions are being sent to the fund and the fund does not exist and is being rejected. Now, in addition to that, ATO has also implemented a time frame where the MVR requests must be responded within 24 hours. So we understand that that's a very, very short turnaround time. So in Simple Fund 360, we have automated this MVR response. So in that sense, because we do know that there would be a lot of administration burden on users if this is not automated. So that's done automatically for you. And I'll show you in the software how you could go about to check if there's any member verification request that has come through and whether any response has been sent through. Obviously, as I mentioned, it is to ensure that the payment goes through to the right fund and to the right member as well. So that's in terms of these two new areas. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through and just explain very, very quickly as to a workflow on how Payday Super really works, or how the contribution messages system really works. The idea behind this is we've seen some support calls and also some clients messaging us through, and they're unsure how this really works. So I thought I would like to take this opportunity to just provide some infographics over here, just to explain to you the entire flow as to how from, I guess, the employer or the payroll system or clearinghouse, any contributions being paid and how it ends up into your Simple Fund 360 software. As I mentioned earlier, if those of you have just recently joined in, the slides will be presented to you at the end of this webinar. So don't worry about taking any pictures. So we will send those slides across to you accordingly. So we'll start with from the top left corner of the screen, which is where contributions are being paid. So first of all, contributions will be paid from your employer or your payroll software or via clearinghouse. Now, two things get sent over here. The contribution amounts will be sent to obviously the bank account that's been nominated or entered within the payroll software. Then, yes, you can see from the dotted line right across to the right-hand side, those contribution amounts get sent to the financial institution. Now, the second part is what will happen at the same time is a SuperStream message will be generated and it will be sent as well. Now, in the payroll software, there is what we call an electronic service address, or ESA for short. So based on the electronic service address, that gets sent to the relevant gateway provider. Once that SuperStream message gets sent to the relevant gateway provider, the gateway provider will then do a quick check based on the ESA that was received. It will then check, first of all, whether the ESA is correct, and then it will check whether the ABN is indeed registered with that particular ESA. If it is not registered with that ESA, then the gateway provider will automatically reject the contribution message and it will be sent back to the payroll software, and they will get a warning message or an error message indicating that the ABN is not registered with that particular ESA. Then you as an administrator, if you are managing that fund, you might need to contact with your the trustees just to confirm what's the correct ESA that should be entered in the payroll software. Assuming that the ABN is indeed registered, what will happen is it will then go into Simple Fund 360. So Simple Fund 360 itself has a few checks in place. So first of all, it will check that the ABN is indeed registered and available in the Simple Fund 360 software. If it matches, then what will happen is we will then receive the contribution message. Now, this first part, as I mentioned, was the contribution amounts. It goes to the financial institutions. What will happen then is if you have data feed, like for example, a bank data feed set up in Simple Fund 360, we will automatically receive that contribution amounts, and that's automatically posted into the transaction screen for you. So that's just an overview of how the entire flow works. So what I've done, as you can see, there's a blue box over there, just to basically try and explain it at a very high level is imagine Simple Fund 360 software as like a hotel, and the ABN is basically your room number. The ESA, or electronic service address, is basically the address of the hotel. So when contribution messages are being sent, first of all, it needs to match and make sure that the ESA address is correct. And if it does, then you need to check whether the room number or the ABN exists. If it does, then you'll get basically the letter being, or in this case, the contribution message being delivered to the fund for you. So that's in a nutshell as to how the entire workflow is from the start, which is from your payroll software, all the way up until Simple Fund 360. Hopefully that makes a little bit more sense in there. And so what we can then do is just to explain some of the changes that we have done or that we have made in the Simple Fund 360 software. So first of all, we have revamped the screen itself. We've now renamed it to Payday Super Contributions, just so that to basically keep up with the current times, everyone's talking about Payday Super, so we just change the name so that everyone's aware where that screen is. Now we've added two new tabs in there, which is called the Received and the Rejected tab. As I mentioned, you are now able to reject contributions, so that's why we have two separate tabs, just to basically separately identify contributions that's been received, and if you have rejected any contributions, they will be sitting in the Rejected tab. In the dashboard as well, we've updated to now show breakdown of employer contributions, super guarantee, and also any salary sacrifice amounts. And to make things a little bit tidy, we've consolidated all these reports into one particular area where you can basically access to view your reports and also to view any member verification request history. Okay, so I'm going to go into one more slide, and then what I'll do is I'll jump into the Simple Fund 360 software. So we've also automated the member verification requests. So as I mentioned earlier, we do a couple of checks. So we first check that the ESA is registered. So the fund's ESA is registered with the ABN. And the additional check that we've done is the TFN matching check. So we want to make sure that the contribution messages are going to the right member as well. And we've built what we call a member verification request history and audit trail so that you can actually have a look and check whether it's been rejected or whether it's been accepted, and the dates as well. And we've added a new logic, which allows you to do contribution rejection. And there is a link over there, which just gives you, I guess, a direct link to our help page, just on Payday Super Guide. So in the slides over here, when you get your, I guess, your notes and all that, you would have that link in there as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to exit from the slides over here, and I'm going into Simple Fund 360. So hopefully everyone can see the screen. Now this is the new Payday Super Contributions tab. Now from the left-hand menu, you would be able to see there is Home, Workflow, and there is a Connect. So to access this particular screen is under the Connect over here, and there is a Payday Super Contributions. So I'm clicking onto it, you'll basically come into the screen. And as I mentioned, there is these two tabs over here, which is Received and Rejected. You will see an action required over here. I'll come back into it in a moment. So just ignore that message at this point in time. That's in relation to rejected contributions, and I'll show you what you need to do or how you could go about to reject the contributions. So in here, you have received and rejected. You will be able to see Anthony Fernandez and then all the contributions being paid in here. As I mentioned, you would have the breakdown on the right-hand side of the table. There is employer amounts, super guarantee, and also salary sacrifice. Now, what you can see in here in terms of member verification requests, there is this green tick next to Anthony Fernandez's name over here. So this is where it indicates that the employer has done a member verification request for Anthony, and we have matched those details, and then we just display a green tick to confirm that everything is matched. So you can see that the date is received, the date was responded, and who the employer and the ABN details are as well. Now, just something to bear in mind in terms of member verification requests. ATO has basically came up and state that the member verification request is actually only to be done when the payroll or the clearinghouse is to post the first ever contribution into the fund. So the idea behind this is that the payroll software is to not do a member verification request at every point in time before the contribution is being paid. So that's not the purpose of it. It's to basically to check that the fund can receive contribution for the first time, because ideally, once you are able to receive the contribution, then basically the next payment should just automatically continue flowing in as per usual. The other time that you would do a member verification request is if the member details has been updated. For example, maybe the member has changed their name. So then the payroll software will need to do another member verification request just to confirm that the member does exist. So that's the idea behind ATO's implementation of MVR. Is not to do a check before each contribution is being paid. Is to only do it when you are paying contribution for the first time ever, or if there's any member details being updated. Now, this is where I say there's a green tick over here. Now, if you want to have a look at any previous verification requests, there is, at this point in time over here, there's reports and history. Click on the drop down, there is a member verification history in here. So I'll click in here, you can see, in this case, active fund member. If you want to have further information, you can click on the view details. That will give you a bit more breakdown in here as well. Okay. So obviously for privacy and security purposes, we do mask the TFN details. We just display the last few digits in there as well as the date of birth as well. We can also show, in this case, other, for example, in this case, myself. And obviously, I do not exist in this fund. So my employer tried to verify me for this particular fund, this particular ABN. I do not exist in there. So because I do not exist in this particular fund, Simple Fund 360 automatically rejects that message and tells that member TFN does not match because it doesn't exist in this fund at all. Okay, so you can click on View Details, and you can see in Simple Fund 360 on the left-hand side over here, no member details available. So that's why it got rejected in that sense. So that's in relation to member verification requests. Now, in terms of actions over here, so I'm sorry, before I go into actions, there's this rejected tab. So you have in rejected tab, basically a list of any contributions that you might have rejected in here. Okay. Now, before I come into the screen, this is where in the actions tab, you could basically reject the contributions from here. So let's say, for example, I realize, okay, this 1st of July contribution, this shouldn't be there. That was done by mistake. You can click on actions. There's a couple of details. Options over here, you have view details, view history, or reject contribution. So it should be pretty straightforward. Just click on reject contribution, and you'll come up with the details in here. Now, when you want to reject a contribution, you need to select a reason. Okay, so there is a couple of reasons in here. This is based off ATO's drop-down list, so we just implemented in here. Select relevant reason in here. So maybe let's say member not found. And the next question is whether a refund is required. Now, just to paint a picture as to why you might need to reject a contribution and based on some of the scenarios that we've seen. So what we've seen is that if you remember the picture that I painted earlier, where Simple Fund 360 is obviously like a hotel and your fund is your hotel room number, your fund ABN is your hotel room number. So what happens is that, for example, in the payroll software, they might have entered the ABN incorrectly. Okay. So what happens is that the contribution message gets sent. Now, even though the ABN is indeed registered with BGL SF360 ESA, and we do have that fund, that contribution message was incorrectly sent to the wrong fund. So we've seen that happen before, not often, but we've seen that happen before. So what happens is that obviously that's an error, and that's where you probably need to select region for rejection as member not found. Now, however, the payroll software has the correct bank account details. So in that sense, you don't really need to do any refund. So you would select no, and then you just click reject in there. However, there are some other scenarios where we've seen an example where a client recently has two super funds. And then the payroll software or the employer has paid the contribution into the wrong super fund and also into the wrong bank account because they've selected the wrong super fund in that case. So in that particular scenario, you would select again member not found or whatever relevant reason in there. And where a refund is required, they would select yes. So I'm just going to select that in this case. So you would have the refund amount automatically populated. That's the full amount in there. But if you do need to change the amounts for whatever reason or another, you can change the figures in here as well. Now, the next is, do you want to create a new payments reference number for this refund? Um, you can click yes if you want to. By default, it's no in that sense. So what will happen is we will automatically use the payment reference number based at the top over here. So this is just matching the original payments reference number. Now, this is important because if you do need to reject and you do need to, I guess, process a refund, just something to keep in mind. By clicking on reject, we do not automatically send any information to the financial institution to start the refund process. And the reason for that is we do not have any connections or any direct connections with the bank or financial institution to initiate this refund process. So you will still need to ensure that you copy this payment reference number. You need to contact the financial institution, provide the payments reference number and the relevant refund amount for them to initiate the refund process. So just something to keep in mind in regards to this one. Okay. So I'm not going to reject over here because what I'm going to do is I'm going into the rejected tab. And that is where you can see in here, depending on the status. So let's say, I'll just say mark this as unresolved for now. So if a refund is required, you'll come up with a status, sent and refund required. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you will need to contact the bank or the financial institution to initiate that refund process. You provide the relevant details. You can get those details in here as well. The details are in here. And basically, once the bank has initiated the refund, and once I guess you confirm with the bank that the refund has been processed, there is the option you can click mark as resolved in here, or in the action over here, mark as resolved, and just say confirm that everything is done. And you have indicator in here updated to refunded. Okay. And what we have done is we've done some audit trail as well to indicate who has marked this as resolved and what date as well. As you can see, this has been marked as resolved by myself on this particular date. Okay. So this is in terms of the rejection process. And that's what you can do in terms of rejecting the contributions. Now you can see in here, as I mentioned over here, there is an action required, print and process a refund. That's because in the rejected tab, there is still one particular rejection that has not been completed yet, where a refund is required. And that's why that message is still appearing. And that appears in the receive or rejected tab. It's just basically to remind you that you still need to, that there's still an action that needs to be processed. Okay. So that's in regards to receiving and rejecting your contributions. And as I mentioned earlier as well, with regards to reports, we've collated everything and just put it into one particular area in this report section. So you have the ability to generate contribution breakdown reports, superstream contribution reports. If you are registering a new ESA for this particular fund, you can generate the letters in here, or if you're changing ESA, you can generate the letters from here as well. And finally, the member verification history could be viewed from there. At the top right, just something to quickly mention as well, you can filter by all members or just particular members in here as well. Okay, so in this case, this Anthony Fernandez with 2 backslash, that's probably because it's appearing under the rejected because that member doesn't exist. So that's where it appears in there. So that is really in regards to the entire changes that we've implemented within the software. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back into the slides over here. So I've shown you how it automatically rejects processes the member verification request and rejects it if it doesn't match with the TFN of the member's TFN within the fund. There is a history and audit trail, and also just showing you how to do the contribution rejection as well. So in summary, basically, just to highlight some of the key changes again with Payday Super. So employers must pay Super at the same time as your wages are being paid. NPP, your bank accounts must be NPP enabled. And in terms of member verification requests, there's a new system to check your member details, and we have automated the responses in there. Now, in terms of some action points, maybe just something to, I guess, be aware of, maybe just be on top of, is obviously to ensure everything is running smoothly. You need to ensure that your ESA is active, so the fund's ESA is active. I put that BGL ESA in there. It's BGL SF360 if you do end up using our ESA. If you use other ESA, that's fine as well, just as long as it's an active ESA. In terms of NPP, just ensure your bank accounts are NPP enabled already. And also for member verification request purposes, just ensure that your fund and your member details are accurate and up to date. So just ensure that your member last name, your first name, last name, your date of birth, and your TFN has been entered in correctly, in the software correctly. So those are basically your action points that I would suggest for you to have a look and have a review to make sure that your Payday Super process is smoothly handled from your side. What I probably can do is just very quickly. So just in case some of you might be wondering, how would you ensure if your bank accounts are NPP enabled already? So what I'll do is there is a website that you could access to. I think it's NPP bank accounts. I think you can just Google that. So I think that's this one. So you can have a look at this particular web page. I think Australian Payment Plus. And then it'll basically tell you in here, it'll give you a list of all the bank accounts that is NPP ready. So these are some additional information for you. I probably don't have this in the slides, but just showing you on screen that you can just Google that, and that probably gives you a bit more information as to whether your bank accounts are NPP ready or not. That's essentially it in terms of today's session. So just want to thank you all for your time, and hopefully you all learned something from today.